Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Solange.
And I'm Hanan.
And today thank you for today's International Women's Day, and we are excited to be here today with to see this inspiring women leaders. And thank you to Generations team who put together this programming. Before we get started, we wanted to thank our sponsors. Big shout out to Vicet, today's lead sponsor. And thank you to our champion sponsors, U.S. Army, TriLink Biotechnologies, part of MyVer Life Sciences, Collins Aerospace, a Ryan Technology subsidiary, and Cox Communications. And thank you to our partners, Illumina Foundations, Fisher Scientific, Vertex Pharmaceuticals, Hological, Tailor-Made Golf Company, Quidel, and finally, Biocom California. And our first panel will be Debrah Fine. And so can you please tell us more about yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Solange. I'm so happy to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to all the young people out there. So I grew up in California. I went to an arts high school. I wanted to be a ballet dancer growing up, but I always loved science. And I really loved my chemistry classes and my biology classes, but I really didn't know what I wanted to do with that love. I really loved sort of how science all made sense, and I really excelled in those classes, but I didn't really have any role models. I didn't see myself in science. And so I ended up going to UCLA, and I discovered my love for science education. And so that's one of the reasons why I pursued my degree in biology, was that I loved teaching. I also took a microbiology class. So micro means small, biology, study of life. And in that class, I learned about viruses. And it's sort of funny to sit here today and tell you that when I was your age, I became super, super interested in viruses. And I thought they were the coolest, most powerful thing. And now I think a lot of people agree with me that they're very, very powerful. I don't think people think they're as cool as I do or like them as much as I do and want to study them as much as I do. But I did my Ph.D. after my bachelor's degree. So I did a college degree, an undergraduate degree at UCLA in biology. And then I went and I studied viruses, and I just became so fascinated then that I wanted to work in the lab. And so I worked in a laboratory, and I also taught all the way through both my undergraduate at UCLA and at Harvard for my PhD. And I just loved teaching. I loved it so much that I decided I wanted to become a teacher. And so I studied science education, how people learn science best. And there's two reasons why I think science education is a great place for you to think about a career. It's that science is really the place where we're going to make the world better. There are a lot of problems facing humanity today that really require a science, technology, engineering, or math degree to do really well. And so my role at Vertex is really to do what I'm doing here today, is to inspire the next generation of science, technology, engineering, and math professionals, and encourage you to think about getting a college degree in STEM, because there are so many things out there that are super, super interesting, and also they're really great careers that are fun and collaborative, and you can make the world a better place. And so at Vertex, we make the world a better place because we make medicine. So you may know or have heard of, you may know someone who has or have heard of the disease cystic fibrosis. So one of the things that Vertex does is makes medication for patients who have cystic fibrosis. So it's really wonderful to work at a company like Vertex that's doing wonderful work out in the community, doing STEAM education, which is my job. But I also know that the scientists in the laboratories are doing great things by bringing medicines to patients. So that's a little about me. I love yoga. I love ballet. I have a son who's 17. He's a junior. I live here in San Diego, and I'm really excited to talk to you more about my background if you have questions.
Thank you so much. You talked more about your college days with going to UCLA and then getting your PhD at Harvard. Do you mind going more into detail as to what that process looked like?
Sure, absolutely. So like I said, I really didn't know exactly why I was going to college. I took a lot of different classes, and I would encourage you to do the same. And kind of think about what floats your boat, what gets you excited to get out of bed and get to class, what you're excited to talk to your peers about. And for me, that was biology. I also said that I had some opportunities to teach, and I did some internships. So internships are this great opportunity to learn while you're working. And so I encourage you to think about internships as a really great way to not only think about learning, but also earning money. And so I was able to teach at a semi-professional level. I got paid for some of it I got class credit. And so I was able to work at the California Science Center, where I developed a lesson for young students in the LA County High School, Los Angeles County High School District. And they dissected pig hearts. And I just really fell in love with hands-on science activities as a way to inspire young people. So that was my undergraduate. And then my PhD, you know, if you asked me when I was your age that if I thought I was going to go to Harvard, my answer would have been a flat no. I might have laughed at you. So it really took a lot of encouragement and seeing a lot of role models to really even just work up the courage and the resume to be able to apply. And it was a really wonderful experience. I will say this, that I definitely experienced a lot of imposter syndrome when I was at Harvard, which is basically this feeling that, geez, is everyone going to find out I'm not as smart as they think I am? And so I really enjoyed the time that I was there to overcome imposter syndrome and realize that I was worth it and I was meant to be there. And I loved research. And so I went into teaching and loved to be close to research at Vertex and see what they're doing in the lab, but be able to really inspire young people to think about doing a career in research themselves. So that's a little bit about my education. Really appreciate the question.
Hey Deborah, not too long ago, I was also applying for colleges. I found it very difficult and very stressful, but not about that. I just wanted to know more about you. Like, who are you as a person?
Oh, thanks so much for that question. What a lovely question. Who am I? So I would say if you ask me we ask our students often to make an identity chart. I think the first thing that comes to mind in my identity is I'm a mom. I had my son when I was in graduate school. So when I was doing my PhD, and not a lot of people have children during that time in their education. And so that was both a challenge and a joy. It's really wonderful to kind of have been in school, which is a little bit more flexible in its time commitments while my son was young. And then I was part of the reason I decided to become a teacher was that I had the same schedule as my son, and I was able to be a really committed and invested mom. So I think for a lot of people out there, women chief among them, thinking about how your family is going to fit into your professional life is really important as we move forward. So teaching and education was really important in that way. I became a yoga instructor. So I took my love of ballet and decided to do something sort of similar but different, and I got to teach a high school yoga class when I was a high school teacher. I still love yoga, and it's something that I really turn to not only personally but professionally to manage anxiety and stress, which we even as adults experience. So I encourage you to find those things out there that you love. And I love to bake and I love to cook. So I think that's a little bit about me. That's my son's cello behind me. I wish I could say I played music, but it's my son's. So thanks for the question.
Thank you so much for the answer. But one of our other questions was, you said that you struggled with imposter syndrome. And can you talk a little bit more about, because us here too in high school, and I think most of us individuals struggle with that. And so can you give sort of like advice on how to overcome that?
Yes, great question. So, you know, first, imposter syndrome is often experienced by women and people of color because we're often the only ones in the room in certain situations, particularly in science courses or in science careers. We're trying to change that because we know that talent is universal, right? So we know all of the talent is in the room out there. And so I want every one of you to think about situations where you've been the only one and how that might have sort of piqued your anxiety, and think about whether or not that might have been a little bit of imposter syndrome. So I think the first step in imposter syndrome is recognizing it and naming it and saying that this is something I'm experiencing. And then taking some time to list out all the reasons why you're not an imposter, right? All the reasons why you have gone through certain situations and proven yourself, right? So you can think about teachers that believe in you, peers that tell you that you're really, really bright and that you have a lot to contribute. So think about those things, maybe list those down. And then when you're having those negative thoughts, those thoughts that challenge you, that say, you know, maybe someone's going to find out I'm not as smart as they think I am. Really write those down and journal about them. What triggered that? You know, was it a specific situation? And I do think that yoga and having hobbies and taking some time to be mindful and to care for yourself really does help. So those are the kinds of things that I would recommend when you're dealing with imposter syndrome. And finally, just knowing you're not alone. A lot of people have been in situations that are new and that have challenged them, and they are not imposters. So I encourage you to go out there and reach for your dreams.
Thank you, Debrah. Indeed, talent is universal. The next person that we have up is Emily. So Emily, could you please tell us more about your background and what you're doing and contributing to?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to be here. So, hi everyone. My name is Emily Parng. My pronouns are she, her. I am originally from Northern California. I grew up there in San Jose, in the San Jose area, and actually moved down here to San Diego to go to school. So I attended UC San Diego for my bachelor's degree in environmental biology. So I grew up as a science nerd. I always nerded out about all different kinds of sciences. I loved watching science shows, but I would say my favorite, absolute favorite, was biology. No hate on the other sciences, but my favorite was biology. And, going into school, I wanted to find a way that I can marry my love for science also with my interest in business. And so I actually took a minor in economics because I was really interested in business and just how did businesses run? How do finances work? Things like that. And I really wasn't sure how I was going to turn that into a career. And I was lucky enough to actually find a role in sales at a pharmaceutical company. And so it was a perfect blend of using my science background, so selling in a scientific field, but also my knowledge of economics and business and things like that into a role. So it was a very exciting role to be in. I'm currently working at a company called Illumina. So if you're in the San Diego area, you may know of Illumina. It's a very large employer, a very large company in the area. But if you're not familiar, if you ever have heard of companies like 23andMe or Ancestry.com, where you spit in a tube and you find out a little bit about your genetic background, that's essentially the type of technology that we make. So the Illumina company makes technology for the space of molecular genetics. So again, a perfect place for me to be because I am a science nerd and I get to nerd out with other scientists about all the cool biological things that we're discovering using this technology. So in my current role, so I talked a little bit about how I was in sales for a few years. In my current role, I have a title called Program Manager. And what that means is I actually lead a commercial team, commercial meaning the folks who are in customer facing roles, so like sales and marketing and things like that. And I lead a commercial team and I work with the development scientists as well as the marketing teams to bring new products to market. So it's a very exciting space to be. I get to work with a lot of very, very smart people every day, and we help really understand what that customer vision looks like when we bring a new product to the market. So it's a very exciting place to be. I really love being where I am today, and I'm very excited to be here today and share with you my journey.
You mentioned UCSD because that's the college that I want to go to, and it's the fact that you have so many ideas and plans that you put together to like be the career that you're in right now. And I feel like I have a very similar idea as to what I want to do. Like I want to do business, I want to do architecture, I want to do interior designing, and it's like I don't know how to do that. So like, do you have an answer to that? How did you combine everything together?
Well, I can't take that much credit, I have to say. Some of it, a little bit was luck, and a little bit was advice, and a little bit was exploring. So Debrah actually talked about internships. I would highly encourage anyone who hasn't thought about an internship or hasn't applied before to really consider that. I would say I tried a lot of things that I didn't like, and that's really how I landed on things that I did like. So I'll give you a couple examples. So when I was in college, I took an internship actually at a wildlife rescue center. So this was a really cool place where they took in wildlife that was injured, would rehabilitate the wildlife, and if possible, they would release it back into the wild, and if not, they would transfer them into a place where they can really live out the rest of their lives. So these are things like mountain lions and owls and eagles. So very, very cool place to work. And I thought I was going to love it. I thought I was going to do that for the rest of my life because I love animals. And while I still love animals today, I decided that maybe that wasn't the type of career that I wanted. It's something that I would still have a passion for. Maybe I would still volunteer at the Wildlife Institute, but it wasn't something that I wanted to do as a day-to-day job. So there are things that you could try out to see if you enjoy it as a job versus as enjoying it as a hobby or maybe a volunteer opportunity. Again, if you can do an internship, that's great. If you can't, you could always volunteer. So those are the kinds of things that I did to help me narrow down what it was that I really liked. And I would say take risks. So, take on jobs that maybe you never even thought you would consider and decide if you like it. I would say when you're early in your career, you have the opportunity to take a lot of risks because there's so many opportunities out there that you may not even realize exist until you try them. I'll tell you today, a lot of the roles that exist here at Illumina didn't exist just a few years ago. So those teams didn't exist, those titles didn't exist. So oftentimes it's really actually hard to answer that question, what do you want to be when you grow up, when those titles don't actually exist today. So keep an open mind, and I would say experiment a lot.
To add more onto that, we know we've already talked more about your professional life. And so going into your personal life, if you don't mind, we'd like to ask, was there any challenges that you faced into going or majoring into the different fields that you're in at the moment? Like, for example, did your parents disapprove, or did some of your friends discourage you from going into the fields you have now? Or would you care to explain the different challenges?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I know we often get a lot of pressure from our parents, and often it's very well intended. I think they want the best for us, and I would say that's definitely the case for my parents. So I will share that I am a first generation American, which means my parents were actually immigrants. They were not born here in the US, and I was the first person in the family to be born in the US. So inherently, there were some challenges there, just culturally, being the first born American citizen here. A lot of it was just learning kind of what is American culture? How do I fit in? Where at home I have a different culture, and when I go to school and when I'm outside, I have to integrate myself in a different culture. So that in itself was a little bit challenging growing up, but I felt like that actually contributed to the way that I may be able to bring a more diverse perspective into certain situations, because I grew up with this kind of dual culture, both at home and kind of in public life. So that was something that was challenging, but I was able to use to my advantage. So my parents actually came to the United States. My dad actually came here for school. So he went and got a degree in computer science. And it was always his goal to actually have me follow in his footsteps in computer science. For me, computer science is cool, but it just wasn't a passion of mine. I really loved biology. I really loved sciences of a different field, just not computer science. And so I wanted to kind of challenge that idea of going into computer science and kind of strike out and go my own path. And at first, I would say I definitely got resistance from my parents because they didn't really understand it. They thought that going into computer science was a very safe career. I would have a lot of job opportunities, but it just wasn't a passion of mine. So for me, it was definitely striking the balance of respecting my parents and understanding that they definitely want the best for me, but at the same time, following what truly is my passion and things that I would be happy with doing.
Thank you so much for such an amazing story. And so we'll get back to you on the Q&A. And so our next panelist is Heather. And so please, can you tell us more about yourself and who you are?
Sure. First, I want to thank everybody for letting me participate today. I am really honored to be here. My name is Heather Vono. I am the Supplier Diversity Manager for Fisher Scientific. My background's a little different. I always knew that I wanted to go to college. My father was a first-generation American. When my grandfather came to the U.S., he came here to start a family and give opportunities to his children that he did not have. For him, there was no higher honor than graduating from an academic institution. So when my father didn't want to finish college because he realized he could make more money in the immediate future working for a steel mill, that did not go over very well. My mother graduated from high school, and the week after high school graduation, she entered a school to learn to be a secretary. And when she married my father, he did not permit her to work, and she was not permitted to get her driver's license. So there was not a big push from my parents from an educational perspective. That all came from my grandparents. But my grandparents didn't finish high school themselves. So when it came time to fill out college applications, financial aid forms, I really didn't have anyone in my immediate family who could help me even fill out those financial aid forms. And it was then that I learned that you can have champions and people who care for you and want the best for you and for you to achieve your goals who are not biologically related to you. I had people encouraging me all along the way, whether that was a coach or a teacher or a boss for my part-time job, parents of my best friend. So they really were the advocate for me so that I could not fail. And so while I started at the University of Pittsburgh, I did have to leave after 2 years because I didn't have the funding to pay for college 4 years straight through. So I joined the military through the GI Bill, and after serving, I went back to college to graduate, where I graduated from Carlow College, which is now called Carlow University. And through different relationships, I ended up being contacted by Fisher Scientific to work on a team that the primary focus was to speak with veterans who were manufacturers or distributors that supported our supplier diversity team and our segment. So now I work with companies who file as woman-owned, minority-owned, veteran-owned that actually make our world cleaner, healthier, and safer.
Thank you, Heather. What I wanted to ask you was, I mean, to be honest, I have a very similar story to yours because both my parents didn't go to college and both of them don't have an education and they don't know what having an education means or does to today's society. So one thing that I wanted to ask you was, like, how did you find the courage? Like, how did you find the courage to go to college? And like, I know I want to go to college because I have so many plans and goals that I want to achieve, but it's the idea when your parents are here always letting you down, telling you, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that, because like they didn't have that experience and they don't know what it means. Like, how would you react to that?
I knew, I wasn't sure what I wanted to graduate in, but I knew I did not want to struggle like they struggled. They struggled. And when I live in Western Pennsylvania, and when I was going to high school, the steel mills were failing. And it was before Pittsburgh was converting over to biotech. So we were on assistance programs and had to stand in line to get government cheese and those sorts of things. And I knew I did not want to struggle. So it was with the help of parents of my best friend or a coach who helped me. And maybe it's that they heard me, that they listened to me and knew what I wanted and helped coach me up and champion me all the way. So I guess my question to you would be, what does your gut tell you? What drives you? What do you love? Even if you can't tell me where you'll be in 5 or 10 years, what are you passionate about, excited about? And who are those people around you, biological or not, who know that you're going to be great, that you're going to be awesome? And stay with those folks.
And to putting it into consideration, would you mind telling us some of the specific struggles that come with being a woman in the STEM major?
It was a scenario where I really needed to find my village, so to speak. I had to find other people who had similar drive, similar love, and we all helped each other along, whether that was homework or going to presentations, anything like that, so that we supported each other in a positive way. There's always going to be someone that tells you you can't do it, or it's been tried before, or challenges that. But those folks are always going to be unhappy because they're unhappy with themselves. So anyone that you can get that can support you or believe in you or has commonalities with you, that's who you want to get with. That's who you want your immediate circle to be.
So Heather, your story is very interesting, and I really admire that you took the time and the opportunity to find who you are as a person. And what is it about STEM that got you, like, to be in STEM?
For me, I love the opportunity when someone learns something, when someone can take either an idea and make it better, or come up with something that I would have never thought of and make something amazing that actually positively impacts their community in whatever regard, whether that's an engineering program where they're redesigning bridges, or whether they're coming up with a new vaccine. It doesn't matter to me. It's all so exciting to see when, in particular, a student discovers something new or improves upon something. For me, it's awesome. There's nothing better than that.
Thank you so much, Heather. Next on the panelist list, we have Adriana. So Adriana, do you mind introducing yourself and talking about your background?
Thank you so much for the invitation. My name is Adriana Gamboa. I'm a director of R&D at Quidel. Quidel is a biotech company in San Diego. And I'll tell you a little bit about my story. So when I was in high school, I actually did not like my chemistry classes. I struggled a lot. When I was in high school, I started to think about what is it that I want to do? Like, what do I want to do? I knew that I wanted to do something to help people. If it was being a doctor or aiding the doctor on the diagnosis, something like that. So I started to look. When I was in high school, I actually did work a little bit in I worked in a clinical lab, and I aided some doctors. I just started to see different things. I knew by then that I wanted to go into something science related. So I got my degree in biochemistry. I got my degree in the University of Tijuana in Mexico. As I was taking my classes in the university, I did do a lot of internships because I really I didn't know after I finished college, what would I do? Like, I didn't really know what would I apply it to. I did internships in hospital. I did internships in pharmacy. I did internships with doctors. I did internships in research. And when I did my first internship in research, I knew that was what I wanted to do. And as I progressed and I graduated, I got an offer to work at a biotech company in San Diego. And I came over and it was to develop different tests for aiding the doctor and knowing if a person's sick or not. And I've been doing that for 20 years. And I have to say that it's very rewarding. We do things to help people. We change people's lives. And in Quidel, right now I work in Quidel. I've been working here for 3 years. We actually are a company that actually focuses on trying to aid the doctor, like get tests that actually help the doctor make a decision. We make a bunch of different products and it's a really good culture. We love it. And I think that's it. It's more of trying to put a little brain and trying to get a better world for all of us and for our kids too.
Thank you so much, Andrea. You're not the only one who doesn't like chemistry. We also don't like it.
Oh, very much.
And one of our other questions was that you talked about majoring into biochemistry. Can you explain what that is and how it was like?
Yes. Okay, so biochemistry, you take classes, biology, chemistry, there's a variety of classes that you take, and then you can apply that to very different fields. If you don't like chemistry in high school, it's totally not the same thing when you go actually to college. I had to find out when I went in, right? It is hard, but it's fascinating. Like, you actually have fun in your classes, you have labs, You don't only have the theoretical part that you're just in the classroom, you actually are in the lab proving all the concepts. Like you get hands-on and you see things like, I know that some of our panelists talked about hands-on. This is hands-on. You do research work, you do a bunch of stuff in school. But yes, you have a lot of chemistry classes in biochem. You probably have 4 semesters of chemistry, different chemistries.
Thank you, Adriana. I also wanted to ask, you mentioned that you were working for Quidel. What is Quidel and why did you choose that to be a part of?
Thank you for that question. Okay, so I've worked in probably, I want to say 7 to 8 different biotech companies in my career. And 3 years ago, I got the opportunity to stumble into Quidel. Quidel has that they do rapid tests, so tests that are 10 minutes, 15 minutes that you can do either in your house, you can do in the doctor's office, or they can do in hospitals. They have a variety. They do like broad screens, they do for heart failure, they do for SARS. We do rapid tests for SARS. You might have them maybe in your house, it's super fast. And then we focus on, our real focus in Quidel is aiding the doctor to make the right decision for the patient and providing solutions, right? Solutions to make better decisions for the doctors. I think we want to change the world, right? And provide aid for the doctors and for the people. Right now that COVID has taught us that now we're testing at home, right? So how do you make a test that anybody can use at home, right?
Thank you so much for the answer. And an interesting question we had to that was, at the beginning you said you hated science or chemistry. And so we wanted to know, how did you end up into majoring in biochemistry in college?
All right. So when I was in high school, just the classes were like, it's hard. It's not that I didn't like it, it was hard, right? But when you start doing the applications for college, you see the different fields, and I started to read about it, and I did do in high school internships to see what would that mean, like what do you apply it to, right? So I know that some of the panelists have encouraged in internships and just doing some research or volunteering. It's super important, because what I thought of chemistry in high school, taking a class of chemistry, is not the same thing, right? So once I knew what I could apply it to. I mean, you can work in a clinical lab, you can work with a doctor, you can work developing new tests. Like right now, my job is developing new tests, like anything new and something that anybody can use. So it's so much fun, and it's super rewarding, right? That you can actually do something like that. I never imagined it, but it was the internships and the research that I did at the beginning, because at the beginning I did think I did not like chemistry, right? But I did know that I wanted to do something in healthcare, like something that I could help, right? And when I start to look and read about it, I'm like, okay, this could be it, right? I could help a doctor, I could help a patient. So it's in general. You can help animals too, by the way. It's not restricted to humans.
Thank you so much for the answer. We'll see you in Q&A, and our next panelist is Penny. Can you please introduce yourself, who you are, as well as your background?
Thank you very much. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity today. I'm excited to be here. My name is Penny Grandon, and I am the Director of Network Operations for the California region. I am an Arizona native, born and raised in Arizona. I've been in California for 3 years now. I've been with Cox Communications for 25 years. I've been in the telecommunications industry for 33 years. And what I do, I have all the technical facilities that feeds all the data, video and telephony products to our customers, our residential customers and commercial business customers. I'll tell you, when I started out, I had no idea that this was going to be my career. You know, when I was growing up, I came from a home where my mother was a factory worker. My dad worked for the city. My grandparents moved from the South out here to pick cotton. So going to college was really not in the plan for any of us. That was, do what you need to do, try to get through school. High school graduation was like a big thing, let alone college. And I was the first grandchild to go to college and graduate. I graduated from ASU. And while going to college, I worked a couple jobs, and then had my son. My son is 30 years old. My daughter is 24. And so it wasn't easy at all, but I think when you put your mind to it, you can do anything. I started in this industry, the only female in the engineering industry for several years. We just started moving more females into our environment, probably the last 15 years of my career. So we're seeing more and more women in engineering, more and more women in leadership positions. So that's something that, definitely we're proud to talk about as well. When I was, trying to figure out what I wanted to do, I just knew I wanted to be better, do better than what my family had. So I went to ASU, and I wanted to be in psychology. Like, I really loved that, figuring people out. And then, life happens, and I had to get a job. And my aunt was one of the first females to actually climb poles for the Mountain Bell telecom systems. And so she suggested, hey, why don't you do an internship with, at the time, it was US West. And now it's CenturyLink. And I thought, well, okay, that sounds cool. I want to work in, the corporate world. This will be exciting. So I landed in engineering and loved it. And so I went on to get my degree. And the employer that I was working with at that time, I wanted to get my degree in engineering. She would not let me take classes that I needed to graduate during the day, and I could make the time up later. So I went to my instructors, and kind of going back to what Debrah and Heather and some of the other ladies said, is you never know when your advocates or support is going to come to you, how it comes to you. And I went back to my instructors and said, look, I'm not going to be able to take these classes I need. What do I do? And at this time, it took me 9 years to get through college because I had to work and had a child to raise. And they said, hey, you're working with an engineering company now. You've got the work experience. Let's see what we can do. So I got my degree in behavioral sciences, which I loved because I kind of have the best of both worlds now. I get to study people and behaviors and figure out how I can impact folks and motivate folks, but yet I get to be in the engineering world as well. So, I got my degree. Once I got my degree, the lady that I worked for when I was doing my internship with US West hired me at Cox Communications. And I've been in the engineering department the whole time. I've held a couple different positions. I developed an engineering group when I was first hired on. Then I had the operations folks, and then I had both groups. And then I had all of Arizona. Then I had Arizona and Vegas. And then 3 years ago, I was promoted to director, and now I have all of California region for Cox Communications.
Thank you so much, Penny. I love your story. You said you migrated from place to place and you're a mother to a child while you were working at the same time going to school. But my question to you is, what is Cox Communications and how does you being a woman contribute to the success of that company?
So Cox Communications is a telecommunications company. We started out providing cable TV to everyone. And then we got into the phone business. So we started providing voice services, and then we got into data, right? So internet. And then we expanded to not just residential folks. We also sell services to commercial businesses. So a lot of schools and commercial businesses in the California area subscribe to our services. So we're basically keeping people connected. And I'll tell you, I really didn't realize the importance of my position and what my folks do until COVID hit. when COVID came, we were the people that kept folks connected, connected to other states, connected to other countries. We kept businesses going. We all pulled together and, had to improve network, right? We had to add more capacity to our services. So all these people that were working from home, going to school from home, could actually have connectivity. So it really was so impactful and powerful to us, because sometimes we get caught up and we don't think we're making a difference in the world. But really, these last 2 years, we saw the impact and the difference that we are making. So we're basically keeping folks connected to their loved ones, to their businesses, to their families and friends. So that's what I do. And being a female in this industry was something that just was not heard of. It is a traditionally white male role for these types of positions. And I always had to prove myself. Every position that I had, it was, okay, we're going to give you a chance to do this, but you're going to have to prove yourself before I got the title, before I got, the pay increase. There were several times early on where I had to go fight for equity. I'm just because I'm a female doesn't mean I don't deserve what my male counterparts are making. So definitely struggles, but I will tell you, Cox Communications has been really good about leaning in and really investing in making, Cox a diverse place to work and making it equitable for us females that are coming into the engineering technology departments.
Thank you so much for your interesting input on that. And so now we're going to be taking questions from the audience. And one of the questions was for Adriana, sorry. And it is, what is the most interesting thing you've worked on so far?
Oh my God. Okay. I think this last 2 years since COVID were extremely, I know that it was a really bad thing, but as a researcher, it was actually super interesting. It was, I think that's one of the best things that we've worked on as a team here at Quidel. And it's just in general, learning as it's moving, as it's approaching every single country and stuff like that. So I think learning about SARS and being able to develop a test so that we can help the world was one of the most interesting things that have happened in the last few years.
Thank you so much, Adriana. The next question is for Emily, and it's about being an immigrant. I am also an immigrant. I come all the way from Africa. I traveled to 2 different places before I came to America. And I just wanted to talk to you about, was it difficult to rehabilitate or to get accustomed to the Southern or Western, community, or was it, oh, I'm so sorry. But how was it, or how did you get accustomed to this world instead of you coming from a whole different country to here?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I empathize with anyone who has had to transition into very different environments throughout their lives. I mean, it's not just from country to country. There could be city to city. There are so many differences in very rich cultures wherever you go. So I really empathize with anyone who's had to make that transition at any point in their lives. So, my parents were the ones who immigrated to the US. I was born in the US, so I had a little bit of an advantage there because I didn't really know anything differently. But it was a little bit of adapting that I had to do because my parents came with their language. So they came from Taiwan. That's where they immigrated from. And so ethnically, I'm Chinese. So I speak Mandarin Chinese at home. And that was the first language that they taught me because they were not fluent in English. And so when they spoke to me in Chinese. And so part of my journey was being brought up in a home that was primarily Chinese based and speaking in the language of Chinese and in Mandarin, and then going out to school and having to make friends and doing everything in English and having to pick up an American culture. And there were certain things about the American culture, just even things like going to a friend's birthday party, or the types of food that Americans would eat that I wasn't very familiar with. And so I would turn to my parents, but then they weren't familiar with it either. So it was kind of, we would look at each other and we'd kind of all have to figure it out at the same time. But I think it was just that kind of problem solving that we had to do with it as a family that really bonded us a lot closer together, and really taught me that there's just so much value when it comes to cultural differences. And so I feel like at a very young age, I was able to appreciate different cultures and see kind of the beauty in those differences, as opposed to maybe some people who were growing up with only seeing one type of culture. And so for me, there was challenges for sure. Not everything was as fun as going to a birthday party and learning what kind of gifts to give our friends. But over time, we were able to overcome those challenges as a family, and it was a big learning opportunity for all of us.
Thank you so much for sharing your unique experience. And so another question we have is for Heather, and it is, what is a day in the life of your position?
So for me, I get to speak with multiple pharmaceutical companies, biotech companies, or academic institutions who are trying to find out ways to deepen their diversity and inclusion. So we will talk about things like potentially hiring STEM events, or actually sourcing from a manufacturer who is minority-owned, woman-owned, veteran-owned. So I get to speak to those folks, and collectively, my team and say that college's team will actually build something that will positively impact the immediate community.
Thank you, Heather. The next question is for Debrah. So what is the path needed to get a PhD?
Wow, great question. Thanks for asking it. I think the path is different for a lot of different disciplines, and by that I mean you can get your PhD in a lot of different subjects. For me, I got my PhD in science, and so it was really important when I was in college to establish that I liked and was successful doing lab work. And so when I was at UCLA, basically just spammed people before that was a thing. I emailed every professor that I could, and I was just a go-getter, and I said, I will provide free lab service if you will teach me some things about biology. And sure enough, one of them said, great. Her lab was so far buried down into the belly of the building at UCLA Medical Center that she said just me getting to her office without getting lost was like her letter of recommendation that she needed. And I learned so much from her. You will find, I think, particularly in science, that people really, there is a pattern and a ethos of stewardship and apprenticeship. And so scientists love to teach other people science. So I think if you go out there and you say, I'm happy to wash your beakers if you'll teach me a little bit about the lab work. And if you're really super interested, I would highly recommend getting some internship experience, as I discussed earlier. So at Vertex, we provide paid internships. I know a lot of companies, particularly those on the call, provide some paid internships for young people to build their experience. And so I think that really says a lot when you're applying for a PhD program to say, hey, I've dipped my toe in the water of research and lab work, and actually I like it, and I want to do it. Because it's really hard to say you're going to do lab work for 6 years without having done a little bit of it. You also need to make really good relationships with your college professors. So going to office hours during college. So professors will hold what are called office hours, and they're just in their office for that hour, and students can come and ask questions. And I would do that. And so the professors knew me, even at a big place like UCLA. So I think it's part of stepping out of imposter syndrome is being willing to go there and ask for help, and knowing if you have that question, 90% sure that someone else has that same question. It's not a silly question. You should go and reach out to professors, reach out to companies, try and get an internship, and also see if there are people in your network that are willing to accept you into the lab. So I'd say the best preparation for a PhD in the sciences is to try and do lab work when you're in any period of your life, but particularly when you're in college, and then also to think about really making relationships with professors so that you can get good letters of recommendation for that next step, which it would be the PhD in science. But I want to say there are a lot of jobs out there, so many amazing, fun, awesome jobs in science that don't require a PhD. And so you do not have to do a PhD. It's a super cool thing to do, but you do not have to do a PhD to be successful in science. But I would recommend going to college and studying science because it's so fun and there's so many cool opportunities in it. So thanks so much for that question.
Thank you so much for your advice, and I'm sure most of my peers will take that into consideration. And so our other question we had was for Penny, and it was, what's the greatest struggle you faced both at the beginning of your career and at the present?
I think at the beginning of my career, it was really just having my place at the table as a contributor. There were many times when, you know, like I said, I was the only female in the room at the table. And it was always assumed that I was there to take notes for everybody. So really having to make relationships with folks that would advocate for me and, you know, would partner with me when I would go to these meetings, that would intentionally ask me to participate or ask me for feedback, that would help me build my credibility. So I think struggling to build that credibility that I deserved to be there, I belonged to be there. And then I would say today, I don't see that as much, and I think that's because I've built those relationships and credibility over the 25 years that I've been with Cox Communications. But I don't see as many women. You know, there's still meetings that I'm in and I'm the only female. So there's still a lot of work to get females into, you know, the engineering environment.
Thank you, Penny. You guys are all such amazing and wonderful women, and you guys have contributed so much to today's world. But my question, we only have 5 minutes left, so anybody from y'all could answer. So the question is, was it more difficult to advance in your career because of your gender?
Yeah.
I would say yes, yes, for sure. And even still today, you know, where there is more awareness, there is more inclusion. We are, you know, working on diversity, but there's still so much more work to do. I think that we have some, for me, speaking for my company, we have some great men in leadership that recognize the value that women are bringing, you know, to the organization, to the bottom line. I respect that. But there's, you know, we can't let our guards down, right? We got to still press forward. There's still lots of room for inclusion, and, you know, just educating folks and bringing them along that, you know, women do add a lot of value to your businesses, and they can balance, you know, their home life. They can balance their work life. So definitely, I think we see it in a lot of places still.
I would like to piggyback on that. So one of the interesting things I think a year and a half ago at Quidel, we started a program of Quidel's Women Leadership Network. And we started this program thinking, what can we do? Like just us, like even if it's outside your job, right? What could we do to help? And we started this initiative of having a women's network. And it's with the idea of that if we can help and provide tools and inspire and just, you know, motivate people, and it's been super successful. I think that's a little bit, right? Because yes, I think we all see it in every field, right? So as companies start to acknowledge and put a little grain of salt in there to start changing that, this Quidel has a really good track record, but this initiative has been helping, and it's been super well received. And it's a forum for women to talk and ask and just get opportunities and just learn new things, right?
Heather, I saw you nodding your head. Do you want to add on to what Adriana was saying?
Yes, I would say that, you know, there are many organizations like my organization, like Fisher Scientific, Thermo Fisher Scientific, that have created employee resource groups and community action councils and mentoring, where a science job, it might be your first job out of college, and you're in your 20s, and it might be your first time working for a larger organization, where we have women who have experience who are pulling other people that are less tenured in their roles and saying, hey, let me introduce you to other people, let me show you about the organization, and do that outreach. Again, a champion for you that just wants to see what's best for you and cheer for you. And there have been times I always say, I'm 4'11", so I'm a small person, and then I'm the only woman in the room, and I'm in my 20s. It took good leaders, strong leaders, to recognize that I could contribute and other people could contribute positively, not who is that 5-foot-tall woman who's 25 years old, what does she know? Instead, I was encouraged and prompted to contribute. And I think that that's what we're all seeing in these environments, is that we're clamoring for folks such as yourselves, students as yourselves, to say, hey, I have an idea, I have a passion, I have a desire. And I think that there's a lot of receptivity to that. So we'd love for you all to jump into STEM, regardless of what segment.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. You're such inspiring women, and I think everyone who saw this today will look up to you. And so thank you so much for everyone who saw this. And in order for you to hear more about inspiring leaders, be sure to check out the Women Who Inspire podcast dropping next week. We asked San Diego country's K-12 students to design this year's 14th annual festival t-shirts. So vote now by scanning the QR code on the screen, and the winner will be announced March 14th. Follow at LoveSTEMSCD on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and check out www.lovestemsd.org for more information on STEM events in our community, including the upcoming San Diego Festival of Science and Engineering.